Is a great danger of some miscalculation, some accidental wider war happening in the region. I think it's already a very volatile and explosive climate in the region, which centers around, of course, the Gaza crisis.
President Joe Biden says US strikes against Houthis in Yemen will continue as they've not yet deterred the group's attacks on Red Sea shipping. The Houthis are backed by Iran, who this week carried out their own airstrikes against targets in Syria, Iraq and then Pakistan, who in turn retaliated with missile attacks on Iran. With tensions rising and these crises now overlapping, where are we heading? Let's speak to Christian Koch, who is Director of Research at the Gulf Research Centre, a think tank which studies the region. Good morning to you.
Very good morning to you.
Just explain this, just pick this apart for us, because this is such a complicated issue. First of all, do you think the US and UK strikes on the Houthis are influencing Iran's strategy?
Well, I think definitely they have influence on Iran's strategy because it puts them also again into more direct contact. Iran works in the region through its proxy forces. It follows what it calls to be a forward defense strategy, so to avoid having direct attacks happening on the Iranian homeland. And with these proxy forces now being in direct engagement with the UK and the US, this also then puts Iran and the US and the UK in closer contact. So there's definitely a danger of escalation there.
So just take us through this. Why has Iran started targeting Pakistan, also Syria and Iraq directly?
Well, Iran has found itself, again, more recently under a little bit of sort of direct attack. We've seen some direct assassination of Iranian leadership being targeted in Syria, in Lebanon. The US has carried out a strike against an Iranian proxy group in Iraq. And I think there's a feeling overall in the Iranian leadership that a level of deterrence with the US and with others needs to be sort of reestablished. They see themselves as being targeted quite viciously, and they need to think about a response to this. Now, at this stage, they don't want to engage directly with American forces. So this again goes to different proxy groups. We also had the attack on the shrine of Qasem Soleimani about 10 days ago in Iran. I think there's a lot of pressure from the Iranian leadership now to respond to some of these attacks and to show that Iran still has options on available to itself that it can respond to some of these provocations.
So Iran's trying to flex its muscle, essentially, in the region. Do you think we're going to see a greater use of proxies like with the Houthis and Hamas in Gaza? Or do you think Iran will look more at these direct interventions themselves?
No, I think Iran feels very comfortable with the strategy it has in place, that it can use the proxy forces. This also allows them a certain level of deniability overall, saying that they're not really involved in supporting these forces, that these groups themselves have their own agency, that they're operating on their own agenda, and this is not necessarily something that Iran is behind. Of course, it's very well known that Iran does supply these forces with lots of military equipment, with political support, et cetera, and is behind them. But I don't think that Iran has any interest in entering sort of in a direct confrontation with the United States or the West.
So for people who don't follow this region as closely as you do, they know there's the use of proxies by Iran. But to see the strikes by Iran itself in Pakistan, in Syria and Iraq, you've also got the Houthis, you've got Hamas in Gaza. How worried should we be about a general escalation of violence within that region? Which, let's face it, when there is an escalation, accidents, mistakes, misjudgments can happen.
Well, I think you just put it very well. There's a great danger of some miscalculation, some accidental wider war happening in the region. I think it's already a very volatile and explosive climate in the region, which centers around, of course, the Gaza crisis. And many countries in the region, the Arab countries also in the forefront, have called for an immediate ceasefire to at least stop the violence there, and to see if one can calm down some of the emotions at the moment. But there's a very high danger that all this escalates very quickly. The strikes between Iran and Pakistan that have happened have not necessarily been expected. Iran and Pakistan have had a fairly good relationship, and the fact that there we have another front opening up is a signal of how quickly things can escalate in the region. And this is something that should be extremely worrisome, because you don't really have control of the situation. With more and more forces entering the equation, this could be extremely explosive and dangerous.
Gosh, I want to ask you as well, before we let you go, the significance of the words of the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, saying that he opposes the creation of a Palestinian state after the Gaza war. I mean, this has been the US's position for a long time, a two-state solution. Many governments around the world believe that that is the only way to achieve any kind of peace within the region. How damaging is it for Benjamin Netanyahu to make these comments?
Well, I think there is an international consensus on the need for a two-state solution. With the Gaza crisis, with the attacks on October 7th, it became clear that the Palestinian issue is still a centerpiece of Middle Eastern politics, and that we need a political solution on this front. And without such a move towards a two-state solution, we were likely to see just have a continued cycle of violence. Now, of course, it's extremely disappointing from the Israeli Prime Minister to hear these statements, because a lot of the countries in the region, including the Arab countries, are engaged in efforts and have signaled very clearly that they're ready for a broader normalization process with Israel if Israel takes steps that will ultimately lead to a Palestinian independent state. Now, he has completely excluded that possibility with his statement, and that puts the region again at a dangerous precipice, I think. And I would have rather have seen him give a little bit of a sense of hope that we need to move towards a political solution, because that's the only way.